Victorian Britain was haunted not only by soot and smoke, but by 1,000 quiet fears. Families swore that 3 sharp knocks on the wall meant death was on its way. Mothers kept cats away from cradles, terrified the animals might steal their infants' breath. At lonely crossroads, the bodies of suicides were buried, pinned to the earth so their spirits could not wander home. In dark parlours, women wore bracelets woven from the hair of the dead, while photographers promised grieving widows that a faint, ghostly husband would appear beside them in the final print. These were not parlour games. They were the daily rituals of a society convinced that the unseen world pressed close against their own. In the mid-19th century, death was not an abstract thought but a neighbour through the wall. In cities from London to Manchester, tuberculosis claimed 1 in 10 lives. Infant mortality reached a dreadful 15%, and almost every family knew mourning firsthand. Out of this came a cult of memory. Mourning could last for years. Clothing dictated behaviour, and homes preserved relics of the dead. Sometimes these were earrings or bracelets woven from their hair. Sometimes they were eerie photographs where the living were promised a glimpse of the departed. For Victorians, this was no game, but a way to endure grief. If you enjoy these stories, know that a like or a subscription means more than you think. It directly supports the channel and helps keep these long journeys into the past alive. Now let your breath soften. Feel the weight of the blanket settle across your shoulders. Breathe deeper, slower, and step with me into a Victorian parlour where silence holds uneasy secrets. You sit in a narrow room heavy with draped curtains. The coal fire has burned low, leaving the air thick with smoke and stale wax. On your lap lies a bracelet, its weight oddly cold, its texture unlike any metal. Dark strands of human hair, braided tightly, press against your fingertips. The weave is intricate, the pattern almost floral, yet you know it is not meant to be beautiful in the way a jewel is beautiful. It is meant to bind memory. Victorian families believed that if they preserved a lock of hair, they preserved a part of the person themselves. Rings, earrings, entire wreaths of hair were commissioned by jewellers who specialised in mourning work. Some homes displayed albums filled not with photographs, but with elaborate braids and curls from lost relatives. Hair did not decay quickly. It endured, an anchor to the departed, a way to hold the dead in your hands. You feel the roughness of the braid against your skin. A strange calm settles with it, as though a presence lingers, protective and watchful. And yet unease comes too. Hair is usually warm, perfumed with soap or skin. Here it is, cold, odourless, stripped of life, a relic disguised as ornament. Your aunt once told you hair work kept away malicious spirits. The spirit of the departed, bound into the jewellery, was said to shield the family. But newspapers of the time whispered doubts. Columns mocked the trade, calling it commerce in grief, since hairworking studios thrived on every busy street. Some mourners wore their mothers' curls in lockets. Others, poorer or less scrupulous, bought pieces ready-made, never knowing if the strands came from a stranger. The clock ticks slowly. Then comes a click of wood and brass. The photographer is ready. His camera looms in the dimness, boxy draped in black cloth, a brass lens glinting faintly. He asks you to sit still, not to blink, not to breathe too deeply. He tells you the exposure will be long, and then in a hush, he promises if your heart is steady, your aunt may appear beside you in the final plate. You have heard of such marvels. Spirit photography was a craze. In London and Boston, in Manchester and Edinburgh, photographers claimed they could capture the dead, families dressed in mourning black, posed with solemn faces, and later received images where a faint white blur hovered near. A hand, a face, a shadow half-formed. Some critics denounced it as trickery, double exposure, glass reflections, clever manipulation of light. Others swore on their lives that the spirits were real, but in the end, what mattered was comfort. To hold a card-mounted print, to see the outline of a beloved child or spouse, and to feel they had not vanished entirely, that was enough. The photographer slides a plate into position. The smell of chemicals drifts through the room, sharp, metallic, unsettling. He pulls a cord. A sudden flare of magnesium explodes, flooding the parlour with white light. Your eyes burn, your chest tightens. For an instant you are blind, and in that flash you almost believe it. A presence beside you, a hand resting lightly on your shoulder, a gaze not your own. Later, as the plate develops, you see yourself rigid, pale, frozen in the long exposure, and there, just beyond your arm, is something else. A blur, translucent, curving like a figure in motion. Is it a trick? A shadow caught in glass? Or has the camera's eye truly glimpsed what yours could not? Letters of the time tell of mothers collapsing in tears, clutching photographs that showed faint outlines of their children, of widows pressing cards to their lips, whispering names into the paper. Some believed they had proof of eternity. Others admitted it might be fraud, but chose to believe anyway. Who would take away such comfort from the grieving? The bracelet of hair tightens against your wrist as you lift the photo. The room smells of singed magnesium, of damp cardboard. Outside, a carriage rattles over cobblestones, and voices of young men echo down the street, alive, careless, bright with laughter. But inside, the silence is absolute, as if the walls themselves respect mourning. You lower the photograph to your lap. The faint figure seems to fade the longer you look. As though retreating into shadow, you touch the braid again, cold, silent, stubbornly enduring. You wonder, do spirits truly linger in these objects, bound by hair or glass? Or is it only grief, searching for a shape, any shape to inhabit? There is no answer, only your breath, steady now. Only the hush of a parlour heavy with memories. Only the weight of what Victorians believed, that the dead were never far, and the living must make room for them at every table, every wall, every photograph. The night air is sharp against your cheeks as you walk beyond the edge of the village. Gas lamps do not reach this far. The only glow comes from a pale moon and the faint shimmer of frost on the hedges. Your boots crunch over the hardened earth. Ahead lies a crossing of 4 roads, lonely, windswept, with no houses in sight, and there by the ditch you see the marker, a small mound of earth, unadorned by cross or stone, a burial place chosen not out of reverence, but out of fear. In Victorian Britain, suicide was not only a tragedy but a crime against both church and law. The act carried such shame that families often hid it. Yet when it could not be denied, the body was carried to a crossroads, far from consecrated ground. Records suggest that sometimes an iron stake was driven through the chest before the soil was thrown, a grim attempt to pin the restless spirit to the earth. Some said the constant traffic of wheels and hooves confused the ghost, scattering its path so it could never find the way home. Others whispered that crossroads were places where dark powers gathered, and by burying the troubled dead there, one darkness might cancel out another. You stand at the edge of the mound and listen. The wind moves like a whisper between the hedgerows. Somewhere a cart rattles, a long way off. You imagine what it would feel like to rest beneath that soil, denied the churchyard, denied a name on stone. The Victorians feared that the spirit of a suicide might return in anger, knocking at windows, chilling the air in bedrooms, drawing children into strange trances. And so they chose this, the crossroads, to trap the soul at the edges of the world. Letters from the time hint at unease. Some neighbours admitted they felt guilty when they passed such a mound. Others avoided it altogether, crossing fields instead of roads. Yet the practice lingered well into the 19th century. Even as some reformers begged for compassion, the fear of the wandering soul outweighed pity. The law itself did not fully end the practice until the 1820s, and even then superstition held on in corners of the countryside. Your breath curls into the night as you turn back toward the village. The thought of the crossroads stays with you, a stone pressed against the ribs. You think of the families left behind, forced to mourn without markers, without prayers, and you wonder if perhaps the spirits do still wait there, caught at the place where paths divide. The warmth of home is a relief. You push open the wooden door, and the air inside feels thick with coal smoke and damp linen. A small cradle sits by the hearth. The baby sleeps, cheeks flushed, tiny mouth parted in uneven breaths. A cat crouches near, its green eyes glowing in the firelight. It watches the child with a stillness too sharp, too knowing. Victorian mothers often warned each other of cats in cradles. The fear was that a cat would climb into the crib, drawn to the warmth and the milk, and press itself so close to the baby's mouth that it would steal the breath away. Inquests of the time occasionally reported such cases: an infant found lifeless, a cat discovered nearby, whether the animal had truly smothered the child, or whether disease had taken the life. The conclusion in many minds was the same: cats were dangerous, almost demonic around infants. You watch as the cat edges closer. Its paws make no sound on the wooden floor. The cradle rocks slightly as the baby stirs, sighing in its sleep. Your pulse quickens. You step forward, lifting the animal gently but firmly, and carry it to the far side of the room. Its body is warm, its fur soft, yet it feels strangely heavy in your arms, as if carrying with it the weight of every whispered story. In truth, modern doctors suggest the real danger was suffocation. A cat curling near an infant's face could block its small mouth and nose, but for Victorians the belief took on a supernatural edge. To steal the breath sounded like theft of life itself, as though the cat drained a soul rather than merely air. Black cats in particular drew the strongest suspicion, their midnight coats tied to witchcraft and ill omen. You set the cat down and watch it slink toward the shadows, tail flicking. The baby's breathing steadies again, a faint whistle with each rise of the chest. You feel relief, but the unease lingers. How many parents sat awake through the night, listening, watching, guarding against creatures that were, in truth, only animals? And yet, in a world where infant death was so common, where 1 in 6 children might not live to see 5 years, can you blame them for clinging to any explanation, however strange? The room grows quieter. Outside, a cart rolls past, its wheels crunching against the frost. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks sharp and sudden before falling silent. You think again of the crossroads, of the earth piled over a restless grave. You think of the cradle, and the cat's green eyes gleaming in the firelight. 2 different fears, but bound by the same thread. The fear that death was always near, waiting at the edge of vision. You settle into a chair by the fire. The glow paints the cradle in soft orange, and the child sighs once more, curling a tiny fist against the blanket. The cat is gone from sight, perhaps hunting mice in the cellar, perhaps slipping back toward the cradle when no one looks. Your hand rests heavy on your knee, the memory of hair jewellery and ghostly photographs lingering with you. The Victorians lived with science rising all around them. Railways, telegraphs, anaesthesia, steam engines, yet superstition held just as firm. Burials at crossroads, cats stealing breath, braids of the dead worn as jewellery, spirits captured in glass. Each fear, each ritual was a way of grasping what they could not control. The fire pops softly. Smoke curls into the rafters. You close your eyes for a moment and hear the rhythm of the baby's breath, steady, fragile, so easily disturbed. And you cannot help but wonder, if you lived here in this time, would you sleep? Or would you keep watch through the night, listening for knocks on the wall, listening for the soft tread of paws? The sound comes in the dark, when the fire has sunk to embers, and even the dog no longer stirs. You lie half awake, the blankets heavy on your chest when it happens. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps against the wall, spaced just so, each echoing through the timber beams. Your body stiffens. For Victorians there was no mistaking it. 3 knocks in the night meant death was coming. Some said it foretold a passing in the household, others that it marked a neighbour, a relative, someone close enough that the omen could find its way to your door. The belief was widespread. whispered across both villages and cities. Newspapers from the 19th century occasionally recorded stories of families swearing they had heard the three knocks before the death of a loved one. Some ministers dismissed it as nonsense, the creak of wood or the shifting of pipes, but for those lying awake in a dark bedroom, the sound felt too precise, too deliberate. You hold your breath, straining your ears. The silence afterward is thicker than before, as though the house itself waits. You wonder if you should get up, light a candle, check the rooms, yet you remain still. To move would be to disturb the balance, to acknowledge the omen, to give it space to act. Your eyes adjust to the dim glow. A framed mirror leans against the wall, its surface dull in the shadows, and suddenly you remember another rule, one that follows death just as closely as the knocking. When someone dies, every mirror in the house must be covered. The idea was simple and terrifying. Victorians believed that the soul, fresh from the body, might linger in the home, hovering, searching. If it saw its reflection in a mirror, it could become trapped, unable to move on. Worse, it might call others into the glass, draw the living into that reflective world of silvered light. So when death entered a house, curtains were drawn, clocks were stopped, and mirrors veiled in heavy cloth. You imagine the fabric falling, the mirror darkened, the room stripped of reflections. Without them, the air feels thicker, duller, yet safer too, as though the boundary between here and elsewhere has been sealed. There are records of this practice in households across Britain. Some families tied black crepe over mirrors, others turned them to face the wall. Even in wealthier homes where ornate gilt mirrors hung in parlours, servants would be sent running for cloth the moment a death was declared. Letters suggest that children sometimes feared looking into mirrors at all during periods of mourning. You sit up slowly, the sound of the knock still vibrating in your ears. Your gaze lingers on the mirror by the wall. Uncovered, the firelight flickers across its surface, and for a heartbeat you think you see movement, not your own, a shadow, tall, standing just behind your chair. You blink, and it is gone. Only your own pale reflection stares back, eyes wide, lips parted. The unease settles deeper. You remember stories of women claiming to see their dead husbands behind them in mirrors, faces blurred by tears, or of servants who swore they saw their mistress walking across the glass days before she died. Skeptics argued these were tricks of light, the mind searching for patterns in flickering reflections. But in the stillness of a Victorian parlour where silence presses close and grief is a daily companion, who could dismiss the possibility so easily? You rise and cross the room. The boards creak underfoot. With trembling fingers you pull a shawl from a chair and drape it over the mirror. The cloth muffles the surface, swallowing the shimmer. At once the room feels different, emptier, but calmer. The mirror is no longer a door. The three knocks still echo in your mind. Perhaps they were only wood settling, only the house sighing as the night deepened. Or perhaps they were a warning. Victorians believed such omens carried weight, and once heard could not be ignored. Some said the spirit itself knocked, asking for recognition. Others argued it was the devil, mocking with false signs. Whatever the origin, the effect was the same. A family lying awake waiting for news, waiting for death to claim its due. You sit again by the fire, watching the cloth ripple faintly in the draught. The ember glow paints your hands in soft red. Outside, a cart passes on the cobbles, the horse's hooves steady, oblivious. Life continues, but inside your room time feels suspended. The Victorians lived in a world where science and superstition collided daily. Telegraph wires carried messages across continents, yet knocks in the night still foretold death. Gas lamps banished shadows, yet mirrors were covered in fear of souls. Progress filled the streets, but inside the home old beliefs held fast. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow. The knocks no longer sound, but their memory lingers. The mirror is hidden, the reflection sealed away. Somewhere, perhaps, a spirit waits, kept from wandering by nothing more than a piece of cloth. And you wonder, as the fire fades to ash, if the knocks were meant for you, would you know, or would you too vanish into the silence, leaving only a covered mirror behind? The clock ticks in the corner of the room, steady as breath, steady as heartbeat. You listen to it as the night stretches long. Every tick is a small assurance that life continues, that order is intact. But then the bed creaks, the whisper of a final breath escapes, and the silence that follows feels endless. Someone has died. At once, you know what must be done. The clocks must be stopped. In Victorian Britain, this act was almost ritual. When death entered a home, the hands of every timepiece were frozen, the pendulum silenced, the mechanism left suspended. It was more than symbolism. It was superstition, deep and solemn. People feared that if the clocks continued to run, time might carry death with it, dragging another soul from the household. Others believed that halting the clocks gave the dead safe passage, preventing their spirit from becoming confused or trapped. Still others whispered that if time went on unbroken, the soul might linger, unable to depart. You rise from the chair and cross to the mantel. The clock sits there, brass and glass, polished once for display, but now dulled by dust. You press your fingers against the pendulum and stop it mid-swing. The silence that follows is immense. It spreads outward, filling the room, swallowing even the faint hiss of coal in the grate. For a moment you wonder if the house itself holds its breath with you. There are accounts of this ritual repeated across cities and countryside alike. Servants were often the ones tasked with the duty, rushing from room to halt every clock. In grand houses, multiple mantelpieces might hold ornate French timepieces, each one silenced with a soft click. In cottages, it might be just a single wall clock, its hands forever pointing to the hour of death. Even coroners and undertakers noted the practice, recording with mild amusement how families insisted upon it. Yet ridicule could not shake the belief. It was too woven into mourning. You run a finger along the stopped clock's surface, tracing the curve of the glass. Your reflection stares back faintly, warped by the dome. Behind you, the room feels dimmer, as though the absence of ticking has stolen a layer of sound. You remember stories of families who, after a death, not only stopped the clocks, but also draped them in cloth, so that no living person would catch their reflection in the glass and be called away as well. The silence grows thick. Then faintly another sound intrudes. A low hoot. You freeze. The window pane rattles softly as the night wind pushes against it. The sound comes again, long, hollow, carrying a note of sorrow. You step closer, drawing the curtain aside, and see it, an owl perched on the sill, its feathers pale in the moonlight, its eyes unblinking. For Victorians, this was no ordinary bird call. The hoot of an owl near a house was considered a sure sign of death. Its presence at the window was dreaded, for people believed the bird carried souls away or heralded the coming of illness. Rural folklore held that if an owl perched near a child's room, the child would not live to see adulthood. Others claimed that owls were messengers from the spirit world, their cries echoing the voices of the dead. You stand transfixed as the owl tilts its head, watching you. Its talons grip the stone sill, its wings shift slightly. The night around it seems unnaturally still, as though every other creature listens. Letters from the period describe entire households waking at the sound of an owl, gathering in fearful silence, waiting for news of death within days. Some naturalists tried to calm the fear, pointing out that owls hunted where vermin thrived, often near houses where sickness already lingered, but such explanations rarely comforted. To hear an owl was to feel the future pressing against the present, whispering of endings yet to come. The bird calls once more, a hollow, drawn-out note that makes the glass tremble. You press your palm to the window, the chills seeping into your skin. For a moment you imagine the owl's eyes are not its own, but borrowed from someone gone, watching, warning. Your memory drifts to another story. A widow in Yorkshire who swore an owl had visited her cottage window each night before her husband died. When the man finally passed, she claimed the bird had not returned once. Tales like these circulated in penny papers and private diaries alike, fueling the belief that owls were creatures of passage, guardians or thieves of souls. Then, with a sudden beat of wings, it lifts and drifts into the night, silent as a shadow. The darkness returns, and only the faint creak of branches remains. You draw the curtain closed and lean against the wall. The clock behind you is still stopped, its hands fixed forever at the moment of death. The owl's call lingers in your ears, a sound that feels less like nature and more like prophecy. The fire burns low, but you do not stir to feed it. Instead, you sit and think of time, how Victorians feared it, how they tried to master it. This was the century of railways and timetables, when watches became as common as bread knives, when time seemed for the first moment in history to belong to human beings. And yet, at the instant of death, they surrendered it completely, silenced its measure, refused to let it govern what came next. The stopped clock and the owl's cry belong together in your mind, one marking the end of time, the other announcing it, both rituals, both warnings, both a way of turning chaos into pattern. The room feels suspended, caught between time and timelessness. You imagine yourself walking through corridors where every clock face points to the same hour, where every window is shadowed by wings. You feel the hush of a parlour heavy with memories, and you cannot help but wonder, if the knocks, the clocks, the owls are only symbols, why do they make your skin prickle even now? You close your eyes, the silence presses close, broken only by the faint crack of cooling embers. The house feels watchful, as though waiting. You breathe slower, deeper, and let yourself sink into the stillness, into the fear, into the fragile comfort, that perhaps, by stopping time and heeding the omen, you have given death what it came for, and no more. The body lies in the front room, laid out on the table where meals were once served. The shutters are drawn, the air heavy with beeswax and coal smoke. You stand at the threshold, your breath catching as family members move quietly around the still figure. A cloth covers the chest, but the face is bare, pale, oddly serene. Only the eyes trouble you. The lids do not always stay shut. Sometimes they drift open just a fraction, enough to show a glint of glassy white, and that, the Victorians believed, was dangerous. An open gaze might pull the living after it, inviting them to follow into death. Worse, it might let the spirit itself wander, seeking company, refusing to rest. So the solution was simple and chilling. 2 coins, heavy and cold, pressed down upon the eyelids. You watch as the act is done. A servant brings pennies, tarnished, rough-edged, and lays them gently over the eyes. The lids close beneath their weight. The coins gleam faintly in the dim light, a grim substitute for pupils. The room feels safer instantly, as though the dead can no longer watch, no longer call. There are accounts of this practice across Britain, from wealthy parlours to cramped cottages. Sometimes the coins were later retrieved and spent, circulating through the economy like silent witnesses of death. Imagine paying for bread with a coin that once sealed a corpse's eyes. Some families, more cautious, buried the coins with the body, ensuring they remained forever tied to the departed. You shiver at the thought. The coins glint as the fire flickers, and you wonder if they truly keep the soul still, or if they are merely symbols, talismans for the living, who cannot bear the thought of the dead watching. The silence is deep, but beneath silence, always, lies fear. And in some houses, that fear turned to stronger measures. Measures meant not only to soothe the dead, but to fight the living who dealt in curses. You recall stories of strange jars dug up in old cottages, bottles sealed with wax filled with rusted nails, bent pins, scraps of cloth, even clumps of hair. Sometimes the liquid inside was foul-smelling, thick. Some reports claimed it was urine, meant to bind a witch's spell and turn it back upon her. These were the infamous witch bottles. In Victorian Britain, They were relics of older folk magic, but they still appeared in the 19th century, hidden in walls, beneath hearths, or under doorsteps, always in secret, always buried with intent. You imagine the scene. A family, fearful of illness or unexplained misfortune, gathers at night. The bottle is prepared in the kitchen, its contents assembled with trembling hands. Nails and needles are dropped in, each one meant to pierce a curse. Hair or nail clippings are added, something of the afflicted person to draw the spell away from their body and into the jar. Then comes the liquid, sealing the connection. At last the stopper is pressed in, and the bottle carried out into the cold dark. You see yourself kneeling by the hearth, prying up the bricks, lowering the bottle into the soil beneath. Your breath fogs as you whisper a prayer, half Christian, half older still. The earth closes over the jar, and you tamp it down firmly. Now the curse is trapped, bound, buried, at least you hope. Historians still debate whether these bottles truly belonged to witchcraft defences or were merely folk remedies, desperate measures in desperate times. Excavations in the 20th and 21st centuries have unearthed dozens of them, some intact, their pins rusted but still sharp, their contents rancid but unmistakable. Each bottle is a message from the past saying, "We were afraid and this was how we fought." You sit back in your chair, the coins gleaming on the dead man's eyes, the fire murmuring softly. The image of the buried bottle lingers, strange and unsettling. Victorians might build railways and factories, but in the heart of the home under the hearth they still whispered of witches, still hid charms to keep evil at bay. The connection between the two superstitions is clear in your mind. Coins and bottles, different in form but alike in purpose. Both are weights, ways to hold something down, an eyelid, a spirit, a curse. Both are small gestures against forces too vast to control. You imagine the coins cooling further, pressing gently against skin that no longer feels. You imagine the bottle in the earth, pins and nails sinking deeper into the foul liquid, waiting like soldiers on guard. The house is quiet. Outside, a gust of wind rattles the shutters, and for a moment you think you hear faint tapping from the hearth. You picture the bottle below, shifting, reacting, perhaps straining against its burial, or perhaps it is only the fire, the wood creaking, the bricks settling. Still, you do not forget the feeling, the sense that beneath every hearth, beneath every silence, lies fear, pinned in place only by the rituals of the living. The coins will be buried soon, either with the man or back into the pockets of the mourners. The bottle may never be found, its curse sealed forever, but you remain here, breathing, watching, half believing, half doubting, caught between reason and ritual. The Victorians lived in that space always, surrounded by progress, yet haunted by omens, trusting in steam engines, yet burying witch bottles, counting pennies, yet pressing them onto dead eyes, each superstition a fragile thread in the fabric of survival. You let your eyes close. The coins gleam faintly behind your lids, the bottle lurks in the soil of your mind, and you wonder what would you hide if fear pressed close upon you. A coin? A bottle? Or something else entirely, waiting to be unearthed by another, a century from now. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears strain for every small sound. The fire has burned low, shadows quiver on the walls, and you sit in a stiff wooden chair, your hands folded loosely in your lap. You think you are alone, and then you hear it creak. The sound comes from across the room. Your eyes dart to the source. Another chair, identical to yours, sits by the hearth, its seat empty, and yet the wood bends, the legs shift, and the air trembles with the unmistakable weight of something unseen. In Victorian times, such a sound was never dismissed. An empty chair creaking, a cushion sinking, a rocking chair swaying on its own. These were not accidents of timber or draught. They were signs. The dead had come to sit among the living. You feel your skin prickle as the chair rocks slightly, then stills, It feels almost courteous, as though the spirit has taken its place quietly, waiting for acknowledgement. Some diaries of the period describe families pausing in conversation when a chair moved, whispering that mother is with us, or he has returned. The presence was not always feared, sometimes it was even welcome, a reassurance that the departed had not abandoned their kin. But other accounts are less gentle. Inquests and letters hint at dread, that people who swore a creaking chair foretold illness, or even death. Within days, some claimed the spirit that sat was not kin but something darker, a wanderer from beyond. The Victorians did not agree on what the sound meant. They only agreed that it meant something. The silence after the creak is thicker, heavier. You can almost picture a shape, half seen in the dimness, leaning forward as though to warm its hands at the dying fire. Your breath slows, each inhale cautious, as if you fear to disturb the guest. Then another sound breaks the stillness. A thud. The wall trembles, and before you can rise, a portrait crashes to the floor. The gilt frame shatters against the boards, glass splinters scattering like sharp rain. Your heart pounds. For Victorians, there was no doubt what this meant. A picture falling from the wall was an omen of death, and not distant death. It meant someone close, someone in the family, would soon be gone. Superstitions like this were recorded across the 19th century. Newspapers carried stories of portraits tumbling without cause, followed days later by obituaries. Skeptics argued that poor plaster, damp walls, or loose hooks explained it. Yet even they admitted the coincidences unnerved them. In households where death was frequent, the connection was impossible to ignore. You kneel to pick up the frame. The glass crunches under your palm, sharp enough to draw a bead of blood. The painted face beneath stares up at you, an ancestor in dark coat and high collar, his eyes now fractured by cracks of broken glass. You shudder, not only at the omen but at the thought, did the fall happen because of gravity, or because some unseen hand pushed it free? Letters tell of widows who swore the portrait of their husband fell just before his final breath, of children who remembered their mother's likeness dropping in the parlour the same night she sickened upstairs. Even in wealthier circles, where skepticism was fashionable, these stories persisted. The connection between image and soul was too strong. A portrait was not just decoration, it was a likeness, a piece of identity, a fragment of the person captured in paint. If it fell, perhaps it meant the person was falling too. You rise. The broken frame clutched against your chest. The chair across from you is still, but you cannot shake the feeling of company, of eyes that are not your own. You set the portrait gently on the mantel, shards of glass still clinging to its surface. The firelight flickers over the cracks, making the face seem to shift, alive and trembling. The Victorians lived surrounded by portraits. Photography had begun to spread, but painted likenesses still hung in parlours, stairwells and bedrooms. To see one fall was not a small accident. It was a jarring intrusion into daily life. No matter how rational one might be, it was difficult not to feel that something or someone had reached out from beyond to give warning. You sit once more, hands clasped tighter now. The air feels colder. The empty chair does not creak again, but the memory of it lingers, paired with the fallen portrait. Two omens, two warnings, bound together in the same room. Perhaps they are only tricks, wood settling, nails loosening, or perhaps they are messages, delivered in the language of silence and accident. The Victorians believed in such messages. In fact, they looked for them. In an age when so much was uncertain, when disease could sweep away a family in weeks, when accidents were common and cures rare, omens gave shape to chaos. They offered a way to see the future, to prepare, even if only with dread. The fire pops, sending sparks upward. You glance at the portrait, fractured but still staring. You glance at the chair, unmoving but still inhabited in your mind, and you breathe slowly, deliberately, as though your breath might be the only thing that keeps balance in the room. Would you, if you lived here, take comfort in these signs? Would you say the chair creaked because a loved one returned to watch over you? Or would you sit awake in terror, waiting for the sound again, knowing it meant the thin veil between worlds had shifted? The room offers no answer. Only silence. Only the faint sting of glass against your skin, the trace of blood marking you as one of the living. And still, in your ears you hear it. The creak of a chair where no one sits. The fall of a portrait no hand touched. Omens or accidents. In Victorian Britain they were one and the same. The day begins grey. The kind of grey that seeps into your bones. Clouds hang low over the rooftops, pressing the air flat and heavy. You walk the narrow street, boots slipping on damp cobbles, when a sudden cry cuts the silence, harsh, raw, unmistakable. Your head tilts upward. On the ridge of the roof sits a raven, feathers glistening black, its beak open in another piercing caw. It stares down at you, unblinking, as if the whole world narrows to the line of its gaze. For Victorians, such a sight was no small thing. To see a raven or crow upon the roof was to see death itself perched above your home. The bird's presence was believed to herald loss, its cry an announcement of doom. Some swore the bird carried souls away in its wings. Others whispered that the devil himself took the form of a raven to look upon his next prize. You stop in the street, your breath a small cloud in the damp air. The bird croaks again, wings rustling against the slate tiles. You remember reading that even Charles Dickens, who loved to keep a raven as a pet, could not escape the association. Ravens in the public mind were bound to omens. The superstition had older roots, stretching back through centuries of folklore. In Norse tales, ravens belonged to Odin, whispering secrets of the living and the dead. In rural Britain, farmers muttered that a crow at the window meant sickness. A raven on the roof meant a coffin would soon be carried out. Even in cities like London, where progress marched with gaslight and iron, such beliefs clung stubbornly to the imagination. The bird calls once more, and a woman on the opposite step makes the sign of the cross. She pulls her shawl tighter and hurries indoors. You remain rooted, staring upward, waiting for the raven to move. It does not. Only when you step inside your own doorway does the sound fade, muffled by walls, but the weight of it lingers. You climb the narrow stairs, each step creaking, until you reach the upper room where the air is thick with the scent of sickness. A figure lies in bed, breath shallow, skin pale. The doctor has gone. His prognosis was clear enough without words. Family members hover, but all keep their eyes fixed on the bedside table, where 2 candles burn steadily. Their flames flicker with every draught, small anchors of light in the dim room. Victorians believed candles held power at the moment of death. A flame at the bedside could guide the departing soul, keeping darkness at bay and showing the spirit its path. Without light, the soul might wander, lost, unable to find its way beyond the threshold. You watch the flames dance. They hiss faintly as wax drips, their glow painting soft halos on the sheets. The dying man's breath catches, ragged, then eases again. Each rise and fall of his chest seems tied to the rhythm of the candles, as if he cannot leave while they still burn. Accounts from the time describe households keeping vigil with candles, refusing to let them gutter out until the final moment. Some believed the flame itself was a reflection of the soul. When it burned tall and steady, the person lingered. When it faltered, the end was near. There were even cases where mourners insisted the flame bent or cracked at the exact second of passing, proof that the candle and the soul were bound. You lean closer, listening to the rasp of breath. The raven's cry still echoes in your mind, mingling with the hiss of the candles. 2 omens, one outside, one within, both pointing to the same truth. The man stirs, his lips part, a wordless murmur slipping out. His hand trembles, reaching toward the flame as though seeking its warmth. You clasp his fingers gently, pressing them back to the coverlet. and in that touch you feel the thinness of his skin, the frailty of the body's shell. The flame flutters suddenly, bending low. A draught, or something else? You feel the air shift, cool against your cheek, and for an instant the room seems crowded with presence, invisible yet close. The Victorians would have said the soul was preparing to leave. Guided by the candle's glow, they might have opened the window next, to give the spirit passage for fear it would linger trapped if denied. These small gestures, candles, windows, covered mirrors, stopped clocks, were all part of the same tapestry of belief. Each act meant to ease the crossing, to protect the living, to make sense of the unspeakable. The raven calls again, muffled but still audible beyond the walls. The sound and the light mingle, bird and flame, omen and ritual. You close your eyes and breathe with the sick man, waiting, listening. His breath grows shallower. The candle flame trembles, bows, then steadies. The family holds its silence like a prayer. When the end comes, it is quiet, a sigh softer than the whisper of wax. The flame flickers once, twice, then rises steady again, as though it has consumed the breath itself, and carries it upward. Someone weeps. Someone crosses themselves. You sit in stillness, watching the light, half expecting the raven to slam against the window, demanding its due, but it does not. Outside, the clouds shift, and a thin bar of moonlight touches the sill. The raven is gone. Only the candle remains, its glow patient, tireless, unyielding. The Victorians feared, but they also hoped. To them, every omen and every ritual was a thread stretched between worlds, fragile but necessary. A raven's cry, a candle's flame, both warnings, both comforts, both reminders that life and death were not far apart, but only a breath, only a flicker, away. You sit until the wax burns low, until the room smells of smoke and tallow. Your eyelids grow heavy, your own breath slow, and you wonder if you heard a raven call outside your window. If you watched a candle bend at your bedside, would you believe? Or would you, like the Victorians, let fear and hope mingle, until they were impossible to tell apart? The flame answers for you, swaying gently in the night. The night is hushed, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. You have drifted half into sleep, your breath slow, your body heavy. Then it comes, sharp, shrill, tearing through the silence. A rooster crows. You jolt awake, your eyes wide. The sound comes again, unmistakable. But it is not dawn, not even near. The window is black with midnight. For Victorians, such a sound was dreaded. Roosters were creatures of order, their cries bound to the rising of the sun. If a rooster crowed at the wrong hour, especially at midnight, it was not nature but omen. Death was near. A soul was departing, or soon would. You hold your breath, waiting. The bird's call seems to echo too long, as though the walls themselves carry it. In some households, people crossed themselves at once. In others, the family rose from bed, whispering prayers, convinced that within hours news would arrive of someone's passing. Folk records describe villages where roosters were killed for crowing in the night, their bodies buried at crossroads to prevent further ill luck. The cry was thought to pierce the veil between worlds, waking not only sleepers but spirits. You remember stories. One woman in Somerset swore her rooster crowed 3 times at midnight, and the very next morning her father-in-law collapsed. In Wales, an entire lane of cottages fell silent after a rooster cried. Within the week, an outbreak of fever swept the street. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps memory-weaving pattern, but for those who heard it in the dark, the fear was immediate, visceral. The call fades. Your chest loosens though unease lingers. The night seems too still, too watchful. You rise from the bed, pacing slowly, the boards cold under your bare feet. Then something small catches your eye. A flutter. A butterfly, pale and fragile, drifts into the room through the gap at the sill. Its wings tremble, reflecting firelight in quicksilver flashes. You freeze, watching as it circles once, twice, then lands on the edge of the chair. To modern eyes it might seem odd. A butterfly in the night, in the heart of a city, wings delicate against the chill. To Victorians, it was no oddity at all. It was a soul. Many believed butterflies carried the spirits of the dead, visiting loved ones after passing. Some said they bore messages from heaven, others that they were the soul itself, wandering before finding its final rest. In Irish folklore, a white butterfly inside the home meant a child's soul lingered near. In England, the sudden appearance of such a creature in a closed room was taken as a sign someone had died or was dying. You step closer. The butterfly does not move. Its wings rise and fall slowly, like the shallow breathing of a sleeper. For a moment, you feel as though another presence fills the room, gentle and sorrowful. You think of your aunt, your father, the friend you lost last winter. Could it be them? Could this fragile thing be the vessel of their return? Victorian children were often told not to chase butterflies in graveyards. Some claimed the insects gathered around fresh graves, each one a soul finding its way. Naturalists tried to argue otherwise, explaining migration, warmth, light, but their words could not compete with the image of wings carrying the essence of someone loved. You sit down slowly, not to disturb it. The butterfly remains. Its body is small, fragile, yet it commands the entire room. You feel oddly comforted, though unease lingers. If it has come to visit, has someone already gone, or is it a warning of what will come? Your mind drifts back to the rooster's cry. The sharpness of it still clings to your ears, paired now with the silence of wings. One loud, one soft, one a warning, one a visitation. Both messages from beyond, if you choose to believe. The butterfly lifts suddenly, circling the room once more. It drifts toward the mirror on the wall, hovers as though uncertain, then disappears into the dark corner near the ceiling. You lose sight of it in the shadows. You return to bed, though sleep does not come easily. The rooster's call and the butterfly's fluttering weave together in your thoughts. You imagine the bird crying to announce a soul's departure, the insect carrying that soul in silence, two halves of a ritual you never chose, but cannot escape. Victorians lived with these signs daily. They might laugh at them in daylight, but at night, when the rooster crowed, when a butterfly entered their chamber, they trembled as you do now. The natural and the supernatural were never far apart. Each superstition was both fear and comfort, telling them that death had order, that signs could be read, that nothing happened without meaning. The fire sputters, the last coal collapsing into ash. You lie still, eyes half closed, listening for wings, for cries, for any whisper of the unseen world. And you wonder if a rooster crowed now outside your own window. If a butterfly landed softly on your hand, would you dismiss it as chance? Or would you, like the Victorians, feel your breath tighten, certain that the boundary between life and death had thinned for just a moment? The room answers only with silence. Yet in that silence, you cannot help but hear echoes the shrill cry of a bird, the gentle brush of wings, both reminders that death comes in sound and silence alike. The night stretches long, the streets empty. When the sound rises, a dog howls. It is not a bark, not the quick, sharp warning of a guard. It is long, mournful, a cry that lifts and bends, trembling in the cold air. You freeze where you stand, the hair on your neck prickling. The sound is too human in its sorrow, too deliberate in its rhythm. For Victorians, a dog's howl at night was never ignored. It meant death was near. Some believed the animal sensed what people could not. The brush of an unseen figure passing through the lanes, the weight of illness hovering in a house. Others said the dog was not sensing death at all, but announcing it, crying out for the soul already claimed. You step closer to the window. In the street below, the animal sits rigid, its nose raised toward the sky, body quivering with each note. No one else is near. The howl carries on, echoing between the rows of brick terraces, sliding under doors into parlours, into beds. People stir in their sleep, shift uneasily, murmur in their dreams. Those who wake will whisper of it tomorrow, certain that by week's end, a coffin will pass through the street. Diaries from the period mention these sounds often. One Londoner recorded in 1864 that his neighbour's dog howled 3 nights in a row, and on the 4th the neighbour's wife died of fever. Another recalled childhood terrors in Yorkshire when packs of dogs seemed to howl together outside the cottage, an omen that cholera would soon sweep through. Whether coincidence or not, the belief clung tight. You watch the animal finally fall silent, its body trembling before it slinks back into shadow. The silence that follows is worse, charged with the weight of what has been declared. You pull the curtains closed, as if fabric could muffle prophecy. The next day, you walk through the gates of the cemetery. Iron bars open onto winding paths lined with yew and elm, the air damp with moss and turned soil. Families move among the graves, but not in mourning. They carry baskets, cloths, even teapots. They spread their blankets on the grass, children chasing each other between the stones. It feels strange, almost irreverent, but this too was a feature of Victorian life. Cemeteries were not only places of grief but of gathering. With urban parks still scarce, the great garden cemeteries of the 19th century, Kensal Green, Highgate, Brompton, and countless smaller plots, became spaces for leisure. Families picnicked among the dead, walked hand in hand, read books on benches between headstones. You sit on the edge of a low stone basket beside you. The bread smells fresh, the cheese sharp, the apples sweet with autumn. All around, voices murmur, laughter rises. Yet beneath it all is a hush, an awareness of where you are. People speak softly, as if afraid to disturb the sleepers under the earth. Some said this habit was born not from casualness, but from reverence. To eat among the dead was to keep them company, to show they were not abandoned. Others suggested it was superstition by sharing food on graves. The living might appease restless spirits, ensuring they did not return to haunt. In some parts of Europe, offerings of food and drink were left directly on the tombs. In Britain, the custom softened into shared meals nearby. You break a piece of bread and chew slowly, watching a child chase a hoop past a marble angel. The angel's face is streaked with soot, its wings chipped, but still it stands, guardian over rows of names. The dog's howl from last night seems far away, almost unreal. Yet, as you watch families spread their meals, you sense the same thread of fear running beneath. Death was everywhere in Victorian life. To eat in the graveyard was not to deny it, but to live alongside it. A woman nearby pours tea into delicate cups, the steam rising into the cool air. She glances at the grave before her, then at her children, and smiles faintly as though the one below the stone joins them in the meal. You wonder how many people found comfort here, binding love and loss with bread and tea, laughter and silence. Still, there were whispers. Some condemned the practice as morbid, indecent, even dangerous, encouraging familiarity with spirits that should be left alone. Others argued it kept the dead restless, tethering them to the living. A few claimed that eating too close to graves might let something slip into you, a shadow, a breath, a hunger not your own. You take another bite, slower this time, your throat tight. The cemetery is beautiful in its way. Trees shading winding paths, monuments rising like frozen figures, but beauty cannot erase the sense of presence. Every stone is a name, every name a silence. The dog's howl returns to your memory, twined with this moment, night's omen and day's ritual, warning and comfort. One reminds you that death is coming, the other insists you sit with it, share a meal, treat it as company. As the afternoon wanes, families gather their baskets, fold their blankets, and drift back toward the gates. The grass shows faint imprints where they sat, crumbs scattered for birds that will peck among the stones. Soon the cemetery will return to quiet, the kind of quiet where every creak, every bird call, every sound feels louder than it should. You linger a moment longer, hand resting on the cool stone beside you. Beneath it lies someone's beloved as real once as you are now. The bread in your stomach feels heavy. You rise slowly, turning back toward the gates, feeling the eyes of angels, crosses, and carved urns follow you. The Victorians lived with death as neighbour, and their superstitions show it. A dog's howl in the night to warn them, a picnic among graves to comfort them. Fear and familiarity, shadow and sunlight threaded into daily life. As you step back into the street, the memory of the howl stirs in your chest, carried forward like an echo you cannot shake. And you wonder, if you heard such a sound tonight, would you flee it, or would you, like them, sit among the graves the next day, breaking bread with silence itself? The question lingers long after the gates close. The workmen mutter as they pry loose a brick. Dust rises in the dim chimney shaft, drifting into the air like ancient smoke. One of them coughs, then calls for a lantern. You lean forward, squinting into the cavity, and at first you see nothing but darkness. Then, with a scrape and a tug, the object emerges. A shoe. Not new, not clean, not placed there by accident. Its leather is cracked, its sole worn thin by years of walking. The heel is hollowed with use, the laces stiff with age. Yet here it is, bricked up inside the wall, hidden, forgotten, secret. You turn it over in your hands. The weight of it is ordinary, but the meaning is not. Shoes hidden in chimneys were common discoveries in Victorian houses, deliberate offerings, talismans against evil. The belief was that the shoe, once moulded by the shape of a foot, carried the imprint of a soul. Witches, demons, wandering spirits, whatever force might seek entry through the hearth, would be distracted, trapped, or driven off by the presence of this familiar object. Some historians argue the tradition stretched back centuries, older even than the Victorians, but in the 19th century it persisted, quietly woven into brick and plaster. Across Britain, builders found shoes in walls, attics, hearths. Some homes contained more than one, sometimes a whole bundle. The practice was never officially acknowledged, never written into rules, yet it lived, hidden in the fabric of houses themselves. You hold the shoe closer, inhaling its dry scent of dust and leather. Whose was it? A child's, a servant's. Perhaps a mother pressed it into the wall with trembling fingers, praying her son would be spared from illness. Perhaps a husband, fearing curses, tucked his wife's slipper above the hearth before sealing it in bricks. The room feels heavier as you set the shoe aside. The hearth yawns open, dark and soot-streaked, a mouth that could swallow anything. You picture spirits drifting down the chimney, only to pause, distracted by the shoe, bound by its memory. The idea unsettles you, yet comforts you too. The air shifts as a door opens. A woman enters, her apron dusted with flour. She carries a small dish of salt, white crystals glimmering faintly in the lantern light. She kneels at the threshold, spreading a line across the wooden floor just inside the doorframe. The sound is soft, a faint hiss as the grains scatter. Salt at the threshold, another ritual of defence. Victorians believed it barred entry to curses, witches, and wandering souls. Evil could not cross salt. Some said the crystals burned the feet of spirits. Others claimed the endlessness of grains distracted demons, forcing them to stop and count, trapped until dawn. Whatever the explanation, the line of salt was a barrier as firm as any lock. You watch her hand tremble slightly as she works, making sure the line is unbroken. She glances toward the door as if expecting someone, or something, to arrive. The salt glows pale in the lantern's circle, sharp against the dark boards. This practice, too, had deep roots. Sailors scattered salt on decks to calm storms. Farmers sprinkled it in barns to protect livestock. In Victorian kitchens it was thrown over the left shoulder to blind the devil. But at thresholds it took on special meaning. The doorway was the place of passage, the thin line between inside and outside, safety and danger, living and dead. The woman straightens, wiping her hands on her apron. She whispers a prayer, though you cannot catch the words. Then she turns to you, eyes solemn as if daring you to cross the line. You hesitate, feeling suddenly like an intruder in your own home. The salt glitters faintly, daring you too. You step back instead. The hearth behind you sighs, settling. The shoe rests on the table, its shadow stretching long in the lantern light. Shoe and salt, two defences, two acts of quiet desperation. They belong together, you realise. Both are about boundaries, one hidden in the wall, unseen, protecting from within, the other laid across the threshold, visible, daring evil to cross. You imagine countless families repeating these rituals across Britain. Some never spoke of it, fearing ridicule. Others whispered proudly of the shoe hidden in their chimney, the salt that kept their infants safe at night. For them, superstition was not a game. It was insurance, against sickness, against spirits, against the endless unknown. The lantern flickers. You glance at the shoe again. For an instant you swear the leather shifts as though something presses from within, testing its prison. You blink, and it is only cracked hide once more. The salt line, too, gleams strangely, each crystal like a tiny blade. You think of footsteps pausing just outside, of shadows halted at the door, unable to pass. You wonder what happens if the line is broken, if a careless boot or stray wind scatters it. Would the barrier fail? Would the house no longer be safe? The silence offers no answer, only the faint ticking of another clock upstairs, not yet stopped, not yet silenced. You sit slowly, your hand brushing the edge of the table. The rituals of the Victorians surround you. Shoes buried in walls, salt scattered in lines, mirrors veiled, clocks halted. Together they form a web of defences, fragile yet stubborn, a way to fight what could not be fought. The fire sighs. Ash drifts upward, settling in faint clouds. You let your eyes close for a moment, imagining the generations who lived behind these walls, who placed their trust in shoes and salt and silence. Did they sleep easier because of it, or did they lie awake as you do now, listening for knocks, for wings, for whispers in the chimney? You draw a breath, slow and careful. The shoe waits, mute. The salt glows faintly, sharp as frost, and you realize that even in your doubt, part of you believes, because belief, after all, is another kind of barrier. The room is dim, lit only by 2 candles. Their flames bend in the draught, steadying, then swaying again. You sit at the small table, watching the wax run down the sides in slow streams. It pulls on the wood, hardening into pale ridges and curls. The patterns look random at first, yet your eyes cannot help but find shapes within them, an arrow, a face, a hollow circle. In Victorian times, such shapes were rarely ignored. Melted wax was a language, a system of omens. A long drip meant a journey, a broken ridge meant betrayal, a sudden crackle of the flame meant death nearby. Families watch their candles not only for light but for messages. You lean closer, listening to the hiss as another drop falls. The flame wavers, and the wax twists into a spiral, sharp and narrow. Your chest tightens. You remember a pamphlet you saw in a London shop. To read the candle is to read the future. It listed symbols, keys for fortune, coffins for death, rings for marriage. Some laughed at it, dismissing it as childish, yet many kept such guides at home, tucked between Bibles and cookbooks, ready for nights when silence grew too heavy. The flame flares suddenly, tall and white. For a moment the room feels brighter, almost harsh. Then it shrinks again, leaving behind a pool of melted wax shaped like a hand. Your breath stills, a hand reaching perhaps, or a hand letting go. Diaries from the 19th century mention these signs. One woman wrote of watching a candle flame split in 2, moments before her husband collapsed with fever. Another recalled the wax forming a small cradle, the very week her sister gave birth. Skeptics called it coincidence, minds imposing order on chance, but in a world where chance often meant death, People clung to any system that promised sense. The wax hardens. You touch it lightly with your fingertip, tracing the grooves. It feels brittle, fragile, and in that fragility, you sense the Victorians' longing to read the future before it arrived, to tame the chaos of life with the smallest of signs. The room grows colder. You rise and move to the small desk by the wall where a thin booklet lies open. Its pages are worn, smudged with ink. This is your dream book. Victorians were fascinated by dreams. They believed night visions carried messages, warnings, even glimpses of the future. Dream books sold cheaply on street corners, filled with lists of symbols and their meanings. Dream of a bird. It meant a letter was coming. Dream of teeth falling. It meant illness or death. Dream of fire. It meant passion or danger, depending on the colour of the flames. You flip the pages slowly, the paper rough under your fingers. Last night's dream is already scribbled in the margin. A ladder, a voice calling my name, water rising. You run your eyes over the printed interpretations. Ladder, success or promotion. Voice, betrayal. Water, trouble. Which meaning is true? Perhaps all, perhaps none. Yet you write them down anyway, as though recording them will anchor the warnings, make them real enough to prepare for. The coal shifts in the grate, sending sparks upward. You glance back at the candle. The flame leans low, thin and blue at its base. Your eyes flick to the dream book, to the word water. You cannot shake the image of last night, the water rushing high, the voice echoing in the dark. Dream interpretation was not only for the poor or uneducated. Even in polite society, dreams were discussed at breakfast tables, compared, debated. Some saw them as divine messages, others as fragments of memory. But in every case they were treated as meaningful. Life in Victorian Britain was too fragile to waste signs, no matter how strange. You dip your pen and write more slowly now, adding today's symbols to the page. Wax formed a hand. Flame flared white. The words look stark against the paper. You imagine someone reading this a century later, puzzled by the mix of dream and candle, wondering how anyone could live so close to fear. But for you, in this moment, they are not fear, they are guidance. The candle pops suddenly. A sharp crack. Wax leaps onto the table, scattering in small beads. Your heart jumps. You glance down, half expecting the book to tell you the meaning at once. But of course it is not written there. You close the cover, pressing your palm flat against it, as if to keep the words contained. The air is heavy with smoke and tallow. The room feels crowded, though you are alone. Candle and dream, flame and ink. They make the invisible visible. You feel watched, guided, warned. Perhaps it is only your mind, weaving meaning where none exists. Yet in the hush of the room, with the candle guttering and the dream fresh on the page, you believe. The Victorians lived this way always, half in light, half in shadow, translating chance into prophecy. Candle wax, dream books, tea leaves, fallen portraits, each was a dictionary of fate, written not by scholars but by fear and longing. And though science marched forward outside, the telegraph, the railway, anesthesia inside the home, the small rituals of superstition endured. The flame sinks lower. The wax curves into new shapes, too many to name. You close your eyes, letting them blur, refusing to read more tonight. The dream book rests beneath your palm, warm from the touch. Slowly you breathe out, steady and quiet, until the only sound is the whisper of wax and the steady beat of your heart. And you wonder if you woke tomorrow to find your dream written plain in ink. If the candle spelled out your future in dripping lines, would you want to know, or would you, like so many before you, dread the knowledge yet seek it all the same? The candle answers in silence, its flame swaying, its wax cooling into omens no one else will ever read. The parlour is warm with steam, the scent of strong black tea curling through the air. You sit at a small table with a porcelain cup in hand, its rim cracked, its saucer faintly chipped. The others have finished their tea already, but you have been told to drink more carefully, to leave just a sip in the bottom. The liquid is dark, flecked with leaves that swirl lazily as you tilt the cup. At last you set it down, turning it 3 times clockwise as instructed. Then you place it in the saucer and slide it across the table. A woman in a heavy shawl leans forward, her eyes sharp despite her years. She lifts the cup and peers inside, tilting it to the light. Her breath whistles softly through her teeth. You feel your palms grow damp. Tea leaf reading was a common amusement in Victorian Britain, but amusement was not all it offered. To many, it was a map of the future. The shapes the leaves formed were never meaningless. A circle meant union. A bird meant news. A snake meant betrayal. Cups became canvases, and fortune-tellers became interpreters of the invisible. The woman's finger hovers over the inside of your cup. "There," she murmurs. You lean closer. At first, all you see are dark stains, streaks of damp leaves clinging to porcelain. But then your eyes catch it. The outline of something curved, unmistakably like a ring. A ring is marriage, she tells you, or union. A bond formed soon. Your heart skips. Then her finger moves, tapping another shape lower in the cup. A cross. A symbol of death, or burden, or faith. Interpretations vary, she says with a shrug, but her gaze lingers long enough to chill you. Victorian dream books, fortune manuals and household guides often carried pages on tea leaf reading. Some mocked it as a parlour game for idle hands, but others treated it seriously, writing entire dictionaries of symbols, promising readers they could learn to interpret fate themselves. In kitchens and drawing rooms alike, cups were turned, patterns studied, futures foretold. You sit back slowly, your breath uneven. The leaves seem to darken as they dry, shapes shifting when you glance away. Perhaps it is only imagination. Perhaps it is more. Your gaze drifts across the parlour to the mirror on the wall. Its frame is gilt, tarnished in places. The glass slightly warped. A fire crackles below it, throwing flickers of light across the surface. You stare at your own reflection, paler than you expect, eyes wide from the reading. Then, without warning, the mirror cracks. The sound is sharp, like ice splitting on a lake. A jagged line cuts across the surface, scattering your reflection into pieces. You stumble back, heart racing. The others gasp, hands flying to their mouths. You already know what it means. In Victorian superstition, as in centuries before, a broken mirror meant 7 years of bad luck. The belief was so widespread it needed no explanation. The mirror held more than reflection. It held a fragment of the soul. To shatter it was to wound yourself, to invite misfortune that lingered for years. Your reflection fractures into 3 pale ovals, your eyes staring back at you from separate shards. You feel as though something essential has been split apart. In households across Britain, mirrors were treated with respect and fear. After death, they were covered. When moved, they were wrapped carefully lest the glass should crack. Even in factories where cheap glass was made in growing numbers, workers spoke of accidents that followed a dropped mirror. 7 years bad luck was the phrase that clung hardest, a sentence long enough to feel like a lifetime in an age where few lived past 50. You step closer to the cracked glass, breath fogging its surface. For a moment you imagine another face there, someone else caught in the shards, someone not your own. The firelight wavers, and the lines of the crack shift like a grim smile. Stories circulated in Victorian papers of people desperate to undo the curse. Some buried the shards under moonlight. Others ground them into dust and scattered them at crossroads. A few insisted the only cure was to wait. 7 years endured, 7 years suffered until the cycle broke. Your hands tremble as you reach toward the surface. Your fingertips graze the crack, cold and sharp. A bead of blood wells instantly, dark against pale skin. The others murmur uneasily. Blood on glass is another omen, though none of you say it aloud. The candle on the mantel hisses. Wax slides down in slow rivulets. You turn away, clutching your hand, heart thudding. Tea leaves and mirrors. One invites you to peer forward, to seek the future in symbols. The other punishes you for daring to fracture reflection. Both belong to the same world, where every object is more than itself, where every accident is a message. You return to the table, your cup still damp, its shapes already shifting. The woman in the shawl watches you quietly, her eyes unreadable. She says nothing more. Perhaps she has seen enough. Perhaps she fears to name what comes next. The mirror groans faintly as the heat from the fire expands its frame. Cracks spread like veins across its surface. Each one feels like a path diverging, a warning written in glass. You force your gaze down to your hands, to the thin cut still bleeding slowly. The Victorians lived with such signs all around them. Cups, mirrors, wax, dreams. To them, the world was always speaking, always offering clues. Whether they brought comfort or dread depended on the eye that saw. The fire burns lower. The parlour smells of ash and tea. You close your eyes, letting the images blur. Leaves in water, a ring, a cross, your reflection fractured. The symbols fold together in your mind, indistinguishable from memory. And you wonder if your own mirror cracked tonight, if your tea left a coffin in its leaves. Would you dismiss it as chance? Or would you, like the Victorians, carry the weight of its warning for years? The only answer is silence, broken only by the faint hiss of cooling glass. The house is silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire. You sit at the table, quill in hand, when a sudden tremor runs through your eyelid. A sharp flicker, quick as lightning, jerks your vision sideways. You blink, rub your brow, but the twitch comes again. Small, insistent, beyond your control. In the Victorian imagination, such a thing was never dismissed. Every movement of the body carried meaning. A twitch of the left eye foretold sorrow, of the right, joy. A sudden jerk of the hand could mean a letter arriving. A shiver across the shoulders meant someone had walked over your future grave. The body was not random. It was a map of messages, restless with signals from the unseen. You press your fingers against your eyelid, holding it still. The skin is warm, damp with nervous sweat. Still, you remember the old sayings. If the right eye itches, someone looks on you with love. If the left, with malice. Whose gaze burns against you now? You glance around the dim room. The corners loom darker, thick with shadow. For a heartbeat, you imagine a figure standing just beyond sight, watching, stirring the twitch in your eye. You shake the thought away, but unease lingers. Letters from the 19th century mention such fears often. A man in Derbyshire wrote of his hand trembling for days, convinced it foretold an accident, and indeed within the week his brother fell from a ladder. Another diary records a woman who swore the twitch of her lip warned her of gossip, and soon after she discovered her name slandered in the parish hall. Coincidence, perhaps. Yet the Victorians did not think so. To them the body was a barometer of fate, trembling with messages. The twitch fades, leaving your skin taut and sore. Relief comes slowly. You set the quill aside, lean back, and close your eyes. Your chest rises, falls, breath steadies you, and then you sneeze. The sound bursts out, sudden, violent. For an instant the world feels torn open. Your head dips forward, lungs wrung empty, breath forced out in a rush. The silence that follows is deeper than before. Sneezing, too, carried heavy meaning. Long before Victorians, people believed that in the instant of a sneeze, the soul itself was expelled, or at least shaken. To sneeze was to stand at the edge of the body, vulnerable, the spirit half loose. That is why the blessing arose. God bless you, a shield against the soul's escape. Victorians still murmured it, quick, urgent, as though their words might tether the sneezer to life. You wipe your nose with a kerchief, uneasy. The superstition runs deeper. A single sneeze meant someone was speaking of you. 2 sneezes, misfortune. 3 sneezes, illness. At night, to sneeze was worst of all. It meant death's shadow had brushed you in your sleep. The candle flickers. You sneeze again. Twice now. Your pulse quickens. A third follows, sharp and wet, leaving your chest raw. You gasp for air, clutching the table. The kerchief trembles in your hand. In rural households, people sometimes refuse to let children sneeze without immediate blessing. Mothers clutched infants to their breast at the faintest twitch, whispering prayers into the soft curls of hair. Some believed a child's soul was too loose, too fragile, and a sneeze could carry it straight into the night. You lean against the table, breath ragged. The memory of childhood surfaces, your grandmother's stern voice warning you never to sneeze with your eyes open, lest the soul slip out through them. You laughed then. You do not laugh now. Victorian medical men sometimes tried to explain sneezing as irritation, dust, infection, but even they admitted the strange truth. Sneezing could precede sickness, a cold, a fever, consumption. In an age where illness often meant death, the superstition felt justified. Your chest eases. At last, you breathe slower, listening to the room. The twitch in your eye has faded. The sneeze is spent, but unease clings, sticky as damp cloth. The Victorians saw these moments as messages, and you cannot help but feel they are right. The body is never silent. It whispers constantly. You only need to learn its language. You rise, pacing slowly across the wooden floor. Your reflection glimmers faintly in the window pane, pale, uncertain. Your body feels both familiar and foreign. Each tremor a signal, each sneeze a crack in the barrier that keeps you whole. You think of the old dream books and fortune guides, how they listed meanings for twitches and sneezes alongside tea leaves and candle wax. To the Victorians, the body itself was another tool for divination, another mirror of the soul. A twitch meant a visitor, a sneeze meant a warning. Even a sudden chill was recorded, explained, feared. You sit once more, pressing your palms flat to the table. The wood is cool, steady. You focus on its solidity, trying to anchor yourself. Yet you cannot forget the sensation of your eyelid jerking, your chest heaving. Messages, all of them, whether you wish to believe or not. The fire sighs, smoke curling upward. Outside, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You inhale deeply, let it out slow, and you wonder if your body warned you of death. If every twitch and sneeze was a message, would you dare to ignore it? Or would you, like the Victorians, carry its weight into every day, listening to the flesh as if it spoke with another's voice? The twitch does not return. The sneezes fade into memory, but the silence they leave behind is not empty. It is full, heavy with the sense that your body is not your own but a vessel carrying whispers from beyond. The afternoon is heavy with rain. It patters against the panes, streaking the glass until the world outside blurs into grey. You sit quietly, listening to the rhythm, when suddenly a sharper sound breaks through, a frantic flutter. You turn toward the window just as it happens. A bird slips through the open sash, wings beating wild against the dim air of the parlour. Its feathers scatter dust from the curtains. Its beak clatters against the glass as it struggles to escape, striking once, twice before wheeling around the room in panic. Your heart hammers. You know at once what this means. For Victorians, a bird flying indoors was not a simple accident. It was an omen, and a dark one. The belief was ancient. A bird inside the home foretold death. Its frantic wings carried more than fear. They carried warning. You duck as it sweeps close, the wind from its wings stirring your hair. It seems desperate, wild, as though driven by something more than confusion. You grab a cloth, waving gently toward the open window. At last the bird darts back into the rain, vanishing in a blur of grey and shadow. The silence it leaves behind is worse. The room feels hollow, charged. You stare at the empty air, the flutter still ringing in your ears. Victorian diaries mention such moments with dread. A woman in Kent recorded a sparrow flying into her dining room in 1862. Her mother died the next day. A farmer in Dorset wrote of a swallow striking his kitchen window, and within the week his child succumbed to fever. Skeptics called it coincidence. Yet in an age where death was always close, the sight of a bird indoors was too sharp, too violent to dismiss. You close the sash firmly, pulling the curtains together. Still, your eyes keep flicking to the corners, half expecting wings to stir again. That night, the house is quieter still. Upstairs, a sick man lies in bed, his breath shallow, chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. You sit by his side, the candlelight trembling across his gaunt face. His eyes open suddenly, bright with a strange intensity. He does not look at you. He looks past you, beyond you, into the dim corner of the room. "Do you see them?" he whispers. His lips tremble, but his voice is sure. You glance back, but the corner is empty, shadowed only by the drape of curtains. Yet he smiles faintly, eyes wide with recognition. "They sip waiting," he murmurs. "So many of them. I sip not afraid." Deathbed visions were common in Victorian accounts. Families recorded with awe the words of the dying, convinced they could glimpse what the living could not. Some claimed their loved ones saw relatives long gone, standing at the foot of the bed. Others whispered of angels, of radiant figures who beckoned with open arms. Medical men dismissed these visions as fever, delirium, the last confusion of the brain. But for families gathered around the bed, the visions were more than comfort. They were proof of life beyond. You take the man's hand, its skin thin, papery. His gaze never wavers from the corner. He speaks again, describing names you recognize, names of the dead. He says they are smiling, calling softly. He even lifts a hand as if to reach theirs. The candle flickers. A draught slides across the room, though the windows are closed. You shiver. For a moment you almost believe you hear it too, voices faint and far like wind in a distant corridor. Letters tell of families deeply moved by such visions. One daughter wrote that her mother spoke to her dead husband hours before she passed, smiling as though at a reunion. Another described a child who reached for an invisible hand, whispering the name of her grandmother. For Victorians, such moments blurred the line between superstition and faith. Were these spirits or hallucinations? Few dared to say. They only knew the visions were real to the dying and unforgettable to the living. The man's breathing grows fainter. His grip loosens in your palm, yet his eyes shine with a light you have never seen before. He whispers one last word, a name you cannot catch, and then exhales softly. His gaze remains fixed beyond you, wide and peaceful, even as his chest falls still. The candle flame steadies. The room is hushed, almost reverent. You sit motionless, hand still clasping his, your mind replaying every sound. The flutter of wings in the parlour, the whisper of voices in the corner, signs and visions, omens and farewells. The Victorians believed such things not because they were gullible, but because they lived so near to death that every sign mattered. A bird through the window, a vision at the end, both reminders that the boundary between worlds was thin as glass, fragile as breath. You rise at last, moving to close the man's eyes. His face is calm, lips faintly curved, as though he still sees what you cannot. You draw the sheet up to his chin, then sit again, listening to the silence. The flutter and the whisper linger in your ears, impossible to forget. And you wonder, if you stood at death's threshold, would you see them too? Would wings beat at the window? Would voices call from the corner? Would you, like the Victorians, believe these signs were not madness, but revelation? The candle burns lower. The room smells of smoke and stillness. You breathe slowly, steady, watching the flame bend. And in the quiet, you half expect wings to stir again, just beyond the curtain, reminding you that death is never far, only waiting for the right moment to fly in. The night air is damp, heavy with mist. You pass along the churchyard path, boots sinking into the softened ground. Above you, the tower looms dark. its spire cutting into the clouded sky. Then, without warning, a bell tolls. The sound is deep, hollow, rolling through the fog like a pulse. Once, twice. It continues in slow rhythm, each note heavy enough to rattle your ribs. For Victorians, the bell at night was no ordinary sound. A church bell tolled after dusk was a sign, a death knell. It could mean someone had just passed, their soul marked by the iron tongue, or it might be rung deliberately. A ritual to guard the graveyard against spirits rising. Some believed the vibration of the sound kept restless dead from wandering. Others said it cleared the path for a departing soul, guiding it away from the living. You pause, listening. The bell swings overhead, its voice muffled yet immense. The fog thickens as if gathering around the sound. You imagine unseen figures drifting between the graves, stirred by the resonance, urged back into the soil. Old parish records describe the tolling of passing bells struck at the moment of death to warn the living and steady the dying. Families counted the strokes, sometimes 3 for a child, 6 for a woman, 9 for a man, believing the number itself carried meaning. In some villages, the bells were rung throughout the night after a funeral, ensuring the soul would not wander back. You clutch your coat tighter as the sound continues. Your eyes flick across the leaning stones, their inscriptions blurred by moss. For a heartbeat you think you see movement there, a figure in the mist. Then another toll crashes down, and the shape dissolves. The bell still echoes in your chest as you leave the churchyard, your ears ringing with its slow cadence. You know the sound will follow you into dreams. The next morning the streets are filled with the murmur of a funeral. Horses in black plumes stamp impatiently, their breath steaming in the chill. The hearse gleams, windows curtained, the coffin just visible within. Mourners walk behind in solemn lines, faces pale, steps measured. You stand at the edge of the crowd, watching the procession move steadily down the cobbled road. Then suddenly, someone steps forward. A man lifts his hand, commanding the procession to stop. The driver pulls the reins, the horses snort, hooves clattering as the line halts. The mourners glance about uneasily. Yet, no one protests. They all know the superstition to stop a funeral procession, even for a moment, was to seize luck for yourself. It seems cruel, yet common. People believed that by halting the march of death, they could interrupt fate, divert its gaze, keep misfortune from falling on their own household. Sometimes passers-by laid coins on the coffin, or touched the pall, gestures meant to absorb good fortune. In other accounts, children ran forward to tug at the reins, laughing, only to be scolded for daring to steal luck from the dead. You watch the man step back at last, satisfied. The procession resumes, slower than before, the wheels crunching as if reluctant to move again. A whisper runs through the crowd. Luck has been taken. Somewhere, a family will be spared sorrow, but perhaps at cost to another. Victorian newspapers occasionally recorded disputes over such acts. Some condemned them as vulgar interruptions, disrespectful to the dead. Others defended them as tradition, part of the strange pact between the living and death itself. In rural areas it was said that failing to stop a procession when given the chance invited misfortune worse than any disrespect. You imagine the dead within the coffin, jolted by the pause, their journey interrupted. Do they resent the theft of luck, or do they pass it willingly, relieved to leave something behind? The question chills you more than the morning air. The horses move on, hooves clattering over stone. The bell from the night before still rings faintly in your ears, echoing in rhythm with the measured steps of the mourners. Both bell and procession belong to the same language, rituals binding the living to the dead, ways of shaping grief into patterns the heart could endure. You turn away at last, the crowd fading behind you. The echo of the bell merges with the memory of wheels grinding to a halt. Two superstitions, different but linked. The sound of iron to hold spirits still, the interruption of a coffin's march to bargain with fate. The Victorians lived by such bargains. They knew death was everywhere, In the cough, the fever, the sudden accident, they had no control over its arrival. But with bells, with halts, with rituals half sacred, half superstitious, they tried to negotiate, to hold death off a little longer, to shape its chaos into something they could name. You walk home slowly, ears straining. The air is quiet now. No tolling, no hooves, only your breath, steady, fragile. And still you wonder, if a funeral passed your door, would you dare to stop it, to steal a scrap of luck for yourself? Or would you, like the Victorians, simply bow your head, listening for the bell that sooner or later tolls for all? The silence answers, deep and final. The chamber is close with heat, though the fire has long since sunk into embers. A dying man lies in the bed, his breath shallow, each one rasping like fabric torn thin. Family gathers quietly around him, their faces pale in the candlelight. The air feels heavy, stifling, as if every breath is shared, borrowed. Then someone whispers the instruction. Open the window. At once a boy moves to the sash. The frame groans as it rises and cold night air floods the room. The flame wavers. Curtains billow inward, brushing against the sheets. For Victorians, this act was more than kindness. Opening a window at the moment of death was ritual. The soul, they believed, must have passage. If the window stayed closed, the spirit might linger, trapped, restless. Some whispered it would hover in corners, confused or worse, attach itself to the living. But with the window open, the soul could slip out, like breath, drift into the night sky, and find its way home. You watch the man's chest rise once more, then sink. His eyes, half open, reflect the candlelight, and then his breath stills. A hush falls. He is gone. Yet the family does not weep. Not yet. Their eyes are fixed on the window, on the fluttering curtains, on the dark beyond. The wind feels sharp against your face. You imagine it carrying something unseen, a whisper, a warmth upward into the stars. Letters from the time tell of mourners who swore they felt a rush of air at the instant of death, as if the soul brushed them in passing. Some claim to hear a faint sigh, though the lips of the dead were silent. The window stays open long after the body grows cold. No one dares shut it too soon for fear the soul might be caught halfway, pressed against the glass. Even in winter, when frost curled on the panes and snow swept through the gaps, families obeyed this rule. Better to shiver than to risk imprisoning a spirit. You step closer to the window, leaning out into the night. The air smells of damp earth and smoke. An owl calls distantly. Somewhere a horse stamps in its stall. The world feels vast, endless, waiting to receive what has just left. And then your eye catches movement near the sill. A flutter of wings, small, fragile. A white moth drifts into the room, circling the candle once before settling on the wall. Its wings glow faintly, soft as linen, shimmering in the unsteady light. Your breath catches. Victorians believed white moths carried souls. Their fragile wings were said to hold the essence of the dead, returning for one last visit or pausing before departure. To kill such a moth was unthinkable. It was like striking down the departed themselves. The family notices. They murmur, their gazes following the moth's slow drift. No one moves to chase it away. Instead, silence deepens, reverent. Some smile faintly, convinced the soul has chosen to linger a moment longer, to comfort them in its delicate form. Naturalists of the time wrote against the superstition, explaining the moth's attraction to flame, its nocturnal habits, but their words did little to soothe hearts that wanted meaning. In households across Britain, the sight of a white moth on the night of death was received not as chance, but as visitation. The moth lifts again, wings beating soundlessly. It drifts toward the window, hovers, then slips out into the dark. The curtains stir in its wake, then fall still. You stand frozen, watching the emptiness it leaves behind. Was it truly the soul, carried in fragile wings, or only an insect, wandering in through the open frame? the answer matters less than the comfort it brought, for in that moment grief had shape and farewell had presence. The window remains open. The room smells of night air now, cool and damp. The body in the bed looks strangely peaceful, lips curved faintly as though smiling at what it last saw. Victorians clung to such rituals because they softened the unbearable, to open the window to see a moth, to imagine a soul carried gently into the world. These were ways to make death less cruel, less final. Science might explain the breeze, the insect, the stillness of lungs, but science did not still the ache in the chest. Superstition, for all its strangeness, could. You linger by the window long after the others leave. The stars are faint, veiled by cloud. The owl calls again, its note low and sorrowful. You imagine the moth's pale wings gliding higher, higher, until lost against the night. Your hand rests on the sill, wood rough beneath your palm. The air chills your skin, but you do not shut it. You cannot. Some part of you believes that if you close the window too soon, you might lock the soul outside, stranded in the cold. You breathe in the night, slow and careful. The curtains ripple once more, as if stirred by something unseen, and you whisper to the empty dark, safe journey. The room answers only with silence, but it is a silence filled with meaning. The morning kitchen is warm with the smell of yeast and coal smoke. You stand beside the hearth as dough rises in a wide wooden bowl, its surface swelling gently like a held breath. The baker's hands are quick, dusted with flour, their movements practiced from years of habit. She shapes the loaf, presses it flat, then takes a blunt tool and scores a mark into the dough. Not a cross for decoration, not a line for portion, a symbol. The Victorians believed bread itself could carry protection. A loaf baked with the right imprint guarded a household against misfortune. Sometimes it was a sign of the cross, invoking blessing. Other times it was a simple circle, binding evil spirits so they could not enter. In some villages, bakers pressed the shape of a key or a hand, promising safe passage or strength. You watch the mark take form, carved deep into the pliant dough. The baker nods once, satisfied, and slides the loaf into the oven. The flames glow through the iron grate, licking against blackened brick. Heat swells into the room. The superstition was old, carried from rural folk customs into city kitchens. To break bread was nourishment, but to bake it marked was defense. Families swore that during outbreaks of fever, only houses with protective loaves escaped. Mothers tucked scraps of imprinted bread beneath children's pillows to ward off nightmares. Some even placed hardened crusts in pockets as charms against sudden illness. The scent grows rich, filling the air. You breathe deeply, but unease clings. Protection is fragile. After all, bread grows stale, crumbs fall away. How much safety can a mark in dough truly hold? The baker removes the loaf at last. Its crust is golden, the imprint dark and sharp. She sets it on the table, steam rising. Her eyes flick toward you. "Keep it close," she murmurs. Later that day, you leave the warmth of the kitchen and step into a lane shadowed by high brick walls. At the end stands a house different from the rest. Its windows are shuttered, its stones blackened with soot. But what strikes you most is the door. Narrow, low, set into the side wall rather than the front. It is bolted shut, sealed with iron bands. No footsteps pass through it. No visitor is welcomed there. This is the corpse door. Victorians inherited the belief that certain houses needed special exits for the dead. Corpses, it was said, must not be carried through the usual doorway. To do so risked letting the soul return, confused, retracing its steps into the home. Instead, builders created side doors, narrow, often unadorned, through which the dead were carried out once and never returned. Afterward, the door might be sealed, bricked over, or kept barred forever. You stand before it, heart thudding. The iron looks rusted, but solid. The ground around the threshold is uneven, as though the earth itself resists. You imagine the countless bodies borne through, coffins angled sideways to fit, pallbearers ducking beneath the lintel, mourners whispering prayers, each departure final. Parish records mention such doors in both cottages and manor houses. Some called them spirit doors, others death doors. Always they served the same purpose: to break the path, to confuse the soul, to keep the living safe. Families believed that if a corpse left by the ordinary way, its ghost might follow the same route back, knocking on familiar walls, sitting again at the familiar table. The air feels colder near the sealed entrance. You press your palm against the wood. It is rough, splintered, faintly damp. For a moment you think you feel a tremor beneath it, as if something presses outward. You snatch your hand away. Inside such houses, people sometimes avoided placing beds near the corpse door. Children were warned never to play by it. Even when sealed, it was treated with respect, a reminder of all who had passed through. You circle the house slowly, returning to the main street. Its front door looks ordinary, painted, framed with stone, flowers in pots. Neighbours pass by without pause, yet you cannot shake the image of the hidden threshold, locked tight against return. The loaf of bread presses warm against your chest, wrapped in cloth inside your bag. Two protections, different but linked. One eaten, one sealed. One to guard the body and life, the other to keep the spirit from wandering after death. Victorian life was full of such rituals, binding safety into every gesture. A loaf scored with symbols, a doorway bricked to halt a ghost, both small rebellions against the vast certainty of death. You return home as the sun sets, laying the bread on the table. Its crust has cooled, but the imprint remains, dark and sure. You glance toward your own doorway, wondering what paths it might open, or refuse. The firelight flickers against the walls. The loaf waits, silent. The memory of the barred door lingers, pressing at the edges of your thoughts. And you wonder if someone you loved were carried through such a passage. Would you believe the door kept them away? Or would you, like so many Victorians, feel safer knowing the path was closed, even if only by wood and superstition? You break the bread at last. Its crust cracks, steam rising faintly. You taste it, warm and soft. For a moment you let yourself believe in its power, that this bite, this mark, this ritual is enough to keep shadows at bay. The night gathers outside. The sealed door waits somewhere in the dark, and the loaf cools slowly, its imprint like a charm against everything unseen. The chapel is silent, the air thick with wax and stone dust. A coffin rests on trestles in the centre, its wood dark, polished, smelling faintly of pine resin. You stand near, listening to the shuffling of mourners' feet, when suddenly a sound breaks the hush. A knock. It is faint, muffled, yet unmistakable. 3 dull thuds, as though from within. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Faces blanch, hands clasped tighter around prayer books. You feel your own breath stop short. Victorians carried a deep fear of being buried alive. The age's medical knowledge, though advancing, was not foolproof. Stories circulated constantly, of coffins exhumed to reveal scratch marks on the lid, of bodies twisted in final panic, of bells rigged to strings tied around wrists, safety coffins that might ring if the sleeper inside awoke. So when a knock was heard, whether in imagination or by accident, it was never dismissed. It was a sign. Perhaps the dead was not dead at all. Or perhaps more darkly, it was not flesh that knocked, but spirit, unsettled, demanding notice. You lean closer to the coffin, heart thudding in your chest. The polished surface shows your reflection, pale, eyes wide. You half expect another sound, another thump from the unseen. None comes, only silence. Yet the fear lingers. Diaries from the time tell of families refusing to bury a body until days had passed, waiting for decay as proof. Undertakers sometimes drilled small holes into coffins to give air should life return. Still others swore they heard tapping from earth itself, knocks echoing faintly through soil. Rational minds called it imagination, or the settling of wood, but the superstition endured, binding fear to every funeral. The mourners whisper now, voices low, frightened. Some cross themselves, others turn their eyes to the ground. The knock has changed the ceremony, tilting it into dread. You step back, unable to shake the image of fingers pressing against the inside of the lid. Later, as you leave the chapel, the air outside feels raw, charged. Rain has begun to fall, misting the cobblestones. From somewhere down the lane comes the clatter of hooves. You turn, squinting through the drizzle. A horse approaches, trotting slowly, its mane damp, its hooves striking sharp against stone. Yet the saddle on its back is empty. No rider guides its reins. No hand pulls the bit. It moves as though summoned, steady, purposeful, yet alone. The sight freezes you where you stand. Victorian superstition held that a riderless horse was a sign of death. If it appeared near a funeral, it was proof that the spirit had departed. If it passed outside a home, it meant someone within would soon die. Some believed the horse itself was a messenger, carrying away the unseen. Others thought it was death's own mount, passing by on silent errands. The horse slows as it nears you, head dipping low. Its breath steams in the cold air. Its eyes glint dark. The reins sway loose, brushing the saddle wet with rain. You feel as though the animal watches you, waiting, measuring. Accounts from the period describe such moments with awe and dread. In Scotland, one man wrote of a riderless horse passing his gate the night before his brother's sudden collapse. In London, a funeral was said to have been followed by a stray mount, unseen by most but noticed by a child, who swore it bore no rider though the reins dragged in the mud. Even military parades sometimes incorporated riderless horses as symbols of the fallen, a ritual born of superstition turned into ceremony. The animal exhales sharply, a sound like a sigh. Then it turns, hooves striking sparks as it moves down the lane, vanishing into the fog. You remain still, heart pounding, ears straining for its retreating steps long after they fade. 2 omens in one day. A knock from a coffin, a horse without rider. Each speaks of death unsettled, death unfinished. Together they weigh heavily, pressing into your chest like stones. You walk slowly home, rain dampening your hair, the streets shining dark. Every shadow feels closer now, every sound sharper. The superstition clings, impossible to shake. Inside your room, you light a candle. The flame steadies, throwing small warmth against the walls. You sit, remembering. The knock, the echo of hooves, signs that might mean nothing or everything. The Victorians lived always in the balance between fear and belief. A sound in wood, a horse in the rain. Such things were not dismissed, for life was too fragile, death too close. To them, every omen was a chance to prepare, a chance to see what otherwise could not be seen. You close your eyes, listening to your own breath. The room is still, yet in the silence you hear it again, faint, imagined, a knock. 3 dull thuds, from somewhere you cannot place. You open your eyes quickly, staring at the coffin-shaped shadows cast by furniture in the flicker of the candle. The horse's hooves echo faintly in your ears. You tell yourself it is nothing, yet part of you believes, as the Victorians believed, that such signs are not random, that they are messages, warnings, truths whispered from beyond. You blow out the candle. Darkness closes around you, thick and heavy. In that dark, the memory of the knock and the riderless horse linger like breath you cannot exhale. The parlour is hushed, thick with the weight of loss. A body lies in the front room, shrouded beneath a white sheet, candles flickering faintly at the corners. Family members gather in silence, their whispers subdued, their movements careful. One of them rises and moves to the wall. A black cloth is folded in her hands. She reaches up and covers the mirror, pressing the fabric into place until the glass disappears. Then another cloth, for the second mirror, then another, until every reflective surface is veiled. For Victorians, this was no empty gesture. Mirrors were dangerous after death. They were thresholds, slippery, deceptive, too easily mistaken for doorways. It was believed that if a soul lingered in the house, it might slip into a mirror and become trapped there, unable to pass on. Worse still, the next person who looked into the glass might see the dead staring back. You watch the black cloth settle, heavy folds obscuring your reflection. The room feels dimmer, more enclosed. Without mirrors, there is no glimmer of light, no duplication of space, only walls, shadows, silence. Accounts from the 19th century describe the practice in both rural cottages and city drawing rooms. Some covered the glass with black crepe, others with sheets or shawls. In wealthier houses, servants were ordered to veil every mirror at once, sometimes within minutes of the death. If a single mirror was forgotten, people trembled, fearing the soul might already be caught inside. You remember a story told in hushed tones, a woman who glanced too soon into a mirror before it was covered. She swore she saw her dead sister standing behind her, eyes wide, mouth open, hand reaching. After that, she would not enter a room with uncovered glass for the rest of her life. The cloths sway faintly in the draught. You imagine countless faces caught behind them, pressed against dark glass, waiting. You turn your eyes away, heart quickening. Later, you leave the house and walk through the misty night. The road stretches ahead, lined with hedges, the air smelling of damp earth. At the junction where 4 lanes meet, you pause. Here, at the crossroads, the soil is different, rougher, disturbed. It was here, in centuries past and well into the Victorian era, that suicides were buried, not in churchyards, not among the consecrated dead, but at the meeting of roads. The belief was harsh and unyielding. Those who took their own lives were denied holy ground. But more than punishment, the crossroads had a purpose. Victorians feared that suicides might rise from their graves, restless, angry, seeking the living. By burying them at a crossing, their spirits would be confused, unable to find their way back. Some graves were even pinned with stakes through the chest, anchoring the body to the earth. Others were covered with heavy stones, ensuring no hand could break through the soil. You stand at the center of the junction, listening to the wind. The 4 roads stretch into darkness, each one vanishing into fog. For a moment you feel dizzy, as though you too are lost. Unable to choose a path, the earth beneath your feet feels unsettled, soft, as though someone stirs below. Victorian newspapers occasionally mention such burials recorded with unease. Even when the practice waned, the fear remained. People avoided crossroads at night, whispering of lights that flickered there, of voices calling, of figures glimpsed and gone. To stumble upon such a grave was to feel the air thicken, heavy with shame and sorrow. You crouch, brushing your hand across the damp soil. A chill runs through you. The stories echo of carters who whipped their horses to speed past such junctions, of mothers warning children never to linger, of travellers who swore they saw pale shapes swaying where no wind blew. The church condemned suicide, but the superstition went deeper. It was not only sin that frightened people, it was the idea of a spirit untethered roaming. The crossroads, with its endless choices, was the only prison strong enough to hold it. You rise slowly, glancing down each road. The fog shifts, curling like smoke. You feel as though eyes watch you from every direction. Though none are visible, the silence presses close, broken only by the soft hiss of wind through hedges. 2 rituals so different yet linked. The mirror veiled to prevent entrapment, the crossroads burial to prevent return. Both reveal the same fear, that the dead do not always rest, that without care they may linger, caught in glass, lost in lanes, wandering until found. You walk on, the mist clinging to your clothes, the damp seeping into your boots. Behind you, the crossroads fades into shadow. Ahead, lights glimmer faintly in windows warm and distant. Yet the images remain in your mind, black cloth over glass, pale soil at the junction. The Victorians lived in constant negotiation with death. Faith offered salvation, science offered explanation, but superstition offered protection, to cover a mirror, to bury at a crossroads. These were ways to wrestle with the unknown, to make sense of what could not be controlled. You breathe deeply, trying to steady yourself. The night air is sharp, almost metallic on your tongue. Somewhere far off, a dog howls. You quicken your pace, unwilling to linger at thresholds, whether of glass or of earth. And you wonder, if a loved one died in your house, would you dare leave the mirror uncovered? If despair drove someone to a lonely end, would you bury them at a crossing to keep their spirit still? Or would you, like the Victorians, cling to ritual, trusting superstition to guard you when faith and reason could not? The night does not answer. Only the fog curls closer, silent as cloth over glass, heavy as soil on restless ground. The house holds itself in silence, the kind of silence that presses on the eardrums, that makes you hear things you never notice by day, the sigh of timber beams, the faint scuttle of something in the walls, the slow, weary drip of rain down a gutter outside. The fire in the grate has collapsed into embers, glowing like half-shuttered eyes. Their light makes the shadows stretch long and thin, bending across the floorboards like reaching hands. You sit in a worn chair, body heavy, mind dulled by fatigue. The hour is late enough that sleep pulls at your edges, coaxing you into its depths. Your chin dips forward. Your breath slows. Then, a knock. It comes sharp, hollow, deliberate. A sound that does not belong in this stillness. Your head jerks up, eyes fixed on the front door. You wait for movement. The latch remains still. The shadows undisturbed. The silence rushes back in, heavier than before. You swallow, your throat dry. Perhaps it was nothing. A beam settling. A trick of the ear. You steady your hands on your knees, willing your heart to slow. The embers shift, letting out a small sigh. And then, the second knock. Louder, more insistent. The wood shivers under it. This is no accident. This is a message. Your skin prickles. The air feels charged, tight, as if the house itself has drawn breath. Somewhere deep in memory, words stir, half heard in childhood. 3 knocks for death. You lean forward, straining to hear. Your breath has grown shallow, your chest tight. The candle flame on the mantel wavers violently, bowing low as if pulled toward the sound. And then it comes. The third knock. Slow, heavy, final. It resounds through the house, through the bones of the walls, through your own ribs until your chest vibrates with it. The sound lingers longer than sound should, echoing into silence like the toll of a bell. Your hands tremble as you rise, pulled toward the door against your will. Each step creaks. Your fingers brush the latch. The wood is cold, slick with damp, as though touched by something not of this world. You brace yourself and pull. The door yawns open on emptiness. The street beyond is swallowed by fog. No figure waits. No visitor stands in shadow. The lane is deserted, hushed, yet the air feels heavy, charged with something unseen. You shut the door quickly, the latch clicking with the sound of finality. But the silence inside has changed. It is no longer the silence of a house at night, but something thicker, watchful, filled with the echo of what has been declared. The superstition was whispered in every corner of Victorian Britain. To hear 3 knocks unexplained was to know that death had already stirred. It was never 1 knock, never 2. It was always 3, and always death followed. Parish journals describe it in matter-of-fact tones. 3 knocks were heard at the vicarage. Mr. Wilton passed the next day. Letters carry more fear. A Liverpool seamstress wrote to her cousin in 1851. It came at my window 3 times upon the glass, though no hand was there. By morning my sister was gone. A miner's wife in Wales recorded that she woke to hear 3 knocks on the bedpost. Hours later, news came of a collapse underground. Was it imagination? The creak of timber, the crack of ice, the tapping of branches in wind? The Victorians did not think so. They believed the knocks were deliberate, the dead announcing their departure, or death himself rapping politely before entering. You sit back heavily, pulse hammering in your ears, the candle flame gutters stretching tall, then shrinking small. Shadows shift along the walls, as if stirred by something moving unseen. Every noise makes you flinch. The groan of the rafters, the whisper of ash settling in the grate. You think of other rituals. Clocks stopped so death would not spread. Mirrors covered so souls would not be trapped. Windows opened so spirits might fly free. Each practice a defense. But these knocks feel different. They are not something you can ward away with cloth or salt. They are not ritual. They are verdict. Victorian families sometimes tried to fight back. Some struck wood themselves, hoping to confuse the omen. If there were more than 3 knocks, the count was broken, the curse undone. Others placed iron across the threshold, convinced it repelled spirits. But most simply sat, resigned, hearts heavy, waiting for the coffin that would inevitably come. The thought chills you. You glance at the door, half expecting it to tremble again, half expecting to see the outline of a pale hand pressing from the other side. But nothing moves, only the echo remains, carved into silence like an inscription. Your eyelids lower, heavy with exhaustion, but you do not dare close them fully. Each time they dip, you imagine waking to another sound, louder, nearer, impossible to ignore. Behind your lids you see the knocks as shapes. 3 shadows at the threshold, waiting patiently. 3 tolls of a bell carried through fog. 3 steps approaching down a corridor that has no end. The house holds its breath. The embers hiss softly, collapsing in on themselves. The air smells of tallow and smoke, sharp and faintly sweet. You whisper to yourself, voice barely audible. Not tonight, not yet. But the silence swallows your words whole. For the Victorians, superstition was not weakness. It was survival in a world where death came suddenly and often. To them, the 3 knocks were not madness. They were warning. They were proof that the boundary between life and death was paper-thin, that the veil shifted easily, that sometimes it pressed close enough to knock. And you, sitting alone in this dim room, cannot help but believe it too. And now the story softens. The knocks fade, their echo dissolving into distance, as if carried away on mist. The door before you is only a door again, plain and harmless. Its wood quiet, its hinges still. You let your body sink deeper into the chair, shoulders loosening, breath easing. The air no longer feels charged. It is calm, cool, gentle. You notice the sound of your own breathing more than anything else. Inhale, exhale, steady, safe. The embers glow faintly in the hearth, their red light warm and soft, not a warning, not an omen, but a comfort. They crackle quietly, each pop a reassurance that the world still turns gently around you. Shadows stretch and curl on the walls, but they are harmless shadows, shifting only with the firelight. Outside, the night grows quieter still. No bird wings, no footsteps, no hollow knocks, only the softness of darkness settling over the house, tucking it in like a blanket. You are safe here. The world of superstition, of restless spirits and whispered omens, drifts behind you now, fading into the past where it belongs. You no longer walk among crossroads or sit in rooms with veiled mirrors. You are not listening for howls or waiting for knocks. You are here, present, warm, alive. Your eyes grow heavier. The images blur, the bread with its imprint, the moth at the window, the raven on the roof. One by one they dissolve like smoke, leaving only stillness. The Victorians lived in fear of signs, but you live in the calm that follows. Your breath slows, matching the rhythm of the embers. Inhale, exhale, each breath carrying you further into quiet. You're still safe now. That world fades behind you. Sweet dreams.